appreciate Doug's mentioning and clarifying once again that New Dawn has no ambition to own or control any asset in respect to the harbor. New Dawn has no capacity to do that. Rather, what this is about for us is facilitating community ownership, and certainly this is not about politics. We've been around for 35 years. We've really maintained an apolitical position that is never going to change. The other thing I think I want to clarify, some people seem to be concerned that this conversation, this debate that's going on, that this is personal, that this is a personality conflict between two people. I don't know John Lynn. I don't know him. I don't understand him, but I don't know him. So, I mean, this is not about personalities. This is not about a conflict in that way. But I do need you to know, okay? I do need you to know, I gotta be upfront with you, that this whole issue, this has been incredibly frustrating for me. This has been incredibly bewildering. And at times, it does make me angry. So I do need just to take a little time here to tell you my perspective on this. First of all, there's three things I believe that I need to share with you. Three things I stand on. First thing is this. I believe that in order to live, in order to grow, I believe a community needs a vision. And I believe this is old. This is not mine. This is old. You know it's old. You go back to the Old Testament, and in the Old Testament it says, if a people do not have a vision, then the people will perish. Quite frankly, we are a people, we do not have a vision, for a lot of good reasons. And that makes us very vulnerable. The second thing that I believe is this. I believe that we're kind of in a bit of a paradox, because, well, on the one hand, we live on an island, and on the other hand, islands tend to be prosperous. And they tend to be prosperous, particularly if they've got control over themselves. We are an island, and we are not prosperous. We are poor. We'll come back to that. And the third thing that I believe, and I find this hard to say to you, but the third thing I believe is that as a community, we are dying. I'm sorry, but we're dying. Look around. We've got a public education system that is contracting so fast, you can't keep count. We've got a municipality that every year has an awful lot less revenue than they did the year before, and they're just contracting. But you know, the real test here is, the fact is, every year we have 1,000 people who are leaving this community. Men, women, young, old, and children. That has gone on for a long time. That continues to go on. That is not sustainable. We are dying. Do you know what's interesting about communities, too? What's interesting about communities in terms of control is when communities do have control, when they do have some say, it is interesting what begins to happen. And that's been a real challenge for us, a real challenge. If you go back, it's very interesting what's happened. If you go back 100 years, go back to the beginning of the 20th century, since that time, do you know what's notable? Is that there was always one person who was in charge. There was one person who was more important than anybody else. And that person was more important than the mayor. That person was more important than any teacher. That person was more important than any elected person. That person was more important to this community than the premier of the province. And that person, or maybe two people, were those that ran the coal fields and the steel plant. They held our destiny in their hands. That was the man. So then, when the private sector left and the government moved in, it's kind of interesting. That tradition continued. It's different in terms of how it happened. It was either a politician or it was a civil servant. But that person continued to be more important than the mayor, have more influence than the mayor, more influence than any other elected person, and to us, seemed to be almost just as important as the premier of the province. What's interesting about the dynamic of that, when there's a force, when you've got a big force in the middle of a community, like that, no matter whether it be well-intentioned or not, and I think it was often well-intentioned. When you've got that force in the middle of a community, what happens is the community, in terms of participating in the economy, the community falls away. It backs off. Now, you know what's been interesting about Cape Breton? As we've been spiraling down economically, and that spiral started, as you know, in the mid-1960s. It's an interesting coincidence. When we changed kind of the man, the spiral started. That wasn't the cause of it, but it is an interesting coincidence. So we kind of backed off in terms of the economy, but then what happened? I mean, people are creative. We're creative. What happened? How did that creativity find expression? Do you know what? Here's what I believe. I believe for over 100 years, over the past 100 years, do you know how the creativity has found expression in this community? It's found expression in our sports and in our music. I mean, tonight is a testimony to that, what we heard. I mean, you know, go back over the last 100 years. Look at the present. We've got stories to tell in terms of what's been accomplished in this community athletically like nobody's business. Way out of whack in relation to our size. Look at us in terms of our artists and music. You know, in every second house, there's something happening. They're playing, or they're writing, or they're singing. It's an amazing thing. Imagine if some of that, just imagine if some of that had been able to find root economically. But that doesn't happen when there's a strong force. It doesn't happen when there's a strong force economically. The community falls away. So this has gone on. This latest experiment has gone on in terms of that force for 40 years. Hasn't worked. Might have been noble, but it hasn't worked. So here we are. Serious trouble. We know it doesn't work. What in the world are we to do? Do you know what's interesting is that every now and then, between the time one man is leaving and the other man is coming, there are these moments, there are these gaps. And you know what's interesting? In those moments and in those gaps, it's interesting to watch the way, I've seen this for 35 years, the community starts to come together. The development with respect to the harbor, it happened in the midst of one of those gaps, the initial development. The idea was conceived, the idea was nurtured, the idea was developed in the context of one of those gaps. Part of what triggered it, the man preceding followed through on the sale of the Sidport site to the community because he said his rationale was the government couldn't develop it. So Laurentian took it, not alone, but there was some nice things started to happen. There was a vision. There was a vision born. That vision was discussed, was teased. There was a harbor master plan developed. There was then an environmental assessment completed, and then the work started in terms of lining up the dredge. And then the next fellow comes and says, he wants to take it back. And he said that Laurentian asked him to take it back. Well, I'm on Laurentian, I never asked him. I can't find any paper where we asked him. I can't find another shareholder that says we asked him. I want to be clear, in this moment of the gap, this community did not do it alone. This community was in partnership with the public sector, with the government. But the government was in what I would call its rightful place. It was under the community, it was behind the community, it was supporting the community. Now I am bewildered about why ECBC is doing what it's doing. I am absolutely bewildered. And it's fairly simple, as Doug said, we simply want to have conversation, a real conversation. And for me, there's been three questions. And the first question is, well, why do you want to own it? Why do you feel you need to own it? Second question is, what is it that you think you can do alone that you couldn't do working in cooperation with this community? Why do you feel you have to go alone? And the third question is, why can't we come together and market this right now? There's an opportunity, there's a window. It's passing us by. We have to get on with this. Why can't you come together with the community and let's do this right now? New Dawn is prepared to be part of that. And then there's a fourth question that's come up in the last number of weeks. And this fourth question just absolutely drives me crazy, so pardon me. You gotta understand something to understand this fourth question. There's a harbor bottom, you know that. But that harbor bottom, for years and years and years, that's been controlled by the Department of Transportation, federal. And every ship that goes by, the Department of Transportation collects dues. In this harbor, in this small harbor, not a lot of activity, but they collect something in the range of $500,000 a year. That's what they collect. And that all goes to Ottawa. I don't know what they do with it, but it all goes to Ottawa. They keep it there. So in the last number of years, the Department of Transportation has been divesting the harbor bottom Now you got to understand the harbor bottom is like this, it's an asset. We don't think of it as an incredible asset. So they've been divesting of it to communities mostly. It's interesting, when the deal is done, Surrey PEI, for example, Department of Transportation divested the harbor to Surrey PEI. As part of that negotiations, the Department of Transportation wrote a check to Surrey PEI for in excess of $20 million to help them get started. Now the other thing you got to understand is if you own a piece of land on the water that's in front of you, although it's owned by the Department of Transportation, you got rights. You got something that's called riparian rights. Strangest word I ever heard in my life. Riparian rights. So that means you got a right in terms of saying whether you're okay with something going in front of your land or not. When the dredge will be done, the dredge material is to be put in front of the Laurentian land. Laurentian knew that was coming. For 3 years, for the last 3 years, Laurentian has lobbied, worked, written, applied to the Department of Transportation to get what's called a water lot lease so they could receive that dredge material that's coming. Anyway, they never got it. And lately, they found out the reason they didn't get it, the reason the Department of Transportation won't give it to them, is because ECBC is negotiating with the Department of Transportation to take control of the harbor bottom. ECBC will control all of the harbor bottom. So my fourth question is, well, why? Why do you want to control the harbor? Why do you want to tie up the harbor? Why do you want to do that? Do you know what? For 7 months, I lay awake lots of nights thinking about this. Like, why? And you know, when you don't have an answer, do you know what happens to your mind? You know the places it goes? Do you know something? It was, in a sense, a long time ago. As I'm getting older, nothing's very long anymore. But you know, there was a time when we as an island, we were independent. We were a colony, you know that, eh? And then in 1821, we were annexed to the mainland. Halifax took over. Do you know why that happened? Do you know what the rationale was? And this is true, I'm not making this up. Do you know why they did that? Because they decided we were too stupid. That's a fact. So maybe he thinks we're too stupid. Maybe that's what he thinks. Or maybe there's some other agenda. And that makes me uncomfortable. That possibility of some other agenda. Now listen, my fourth question here tonight is this. I got this moral dilemma. Laurentian has to meet. Laurentian has to decide this week whether to give up its riparian rights, essentially to give up the water that's in front of that site, so that the dredge can proceed. If it says no, then LEC will be accused of blocking the dredge. If LEC says yes, that means the 200 acres that are going to be created when the dredge material is put there, that gets turned over to ECBC. They own it. Laurentian gets landlocked. So if he couldn't get it from the road, he's going to get it from the water. And I am so frustrated about this. So, we finally have a meeting. Now look, to be honest with you, the man did not agree to meet with us. The man was told to meet with us. That's just a fact. And when I sit before that man, I don't want to ask him. I do not want to ask him. I want to tell him that from the point of view of this community, from the perspective of this community, don't do this. Do not take control of our assets. When I sit before that man, I do not want to ask him about cooperating. I want to tell him that that's his responsibility to cooperate with this community, to stand behind us, to stand under us. When I sit in front of that man, I do not want to ask that man to come and work with us in terms of marketing this precious asset. I want to tell him to come with us, to stand behind us, to get beneath us, and move this asset forward. That's what I want to tell him. And I want to tell him, I don't want to ask him about not to take the harbor bottom. I want to tell him that that harbor bottom belongs to this community. That harbor bottom has to be taken under the stewardship of the municipality of Cape Breton County. That's what I want to tell him. Tonight, we stand here at your service. That is the message that we would propose to bring. I sense some support for that. But we want to confirm that we are aligned with you. We are at your service. God bless you, and thank you very much.